$100,000. That's what it cost to turn my niece into a doctor. I sold my house, I worked 3 jobs, I went without, and when she finally wore that white coat, do you know what she said to me? "Aunt Katherine, I think it's time we had some distance. You've been depending on me too much." Let me start from the beginning. My name is Katherine Miller and I'm 58 years old. I never had children of my own. My husband left me when I was 32, saying he wanted a fresh start with someone younger. I didn't fight him. I let him go and focused on building a quiet life for myself. I worked as a bookkeeper at a small accounting firm, lived modestly, saved every penny I could. Then my sister died. Rebecca was only 35 when the cancer took her. She left behind a 7-year-old daughter, Melissa. Melissa's father had never been in the picture, just some guy Rebecca dated briefly in college. When Rebecca passed, I didn't hesitate. I took Melissa in immediately. The years passed quickly. Melissa grew into a bright, ambitious teenager. She was always at the top of her class, always focused, always driven. I was so proud of her. I worked extra hours to pay for SAT prep courses and college application fees. When she got accepted to Monroe University with a partial scholarship, I cried tears of joy. But partial wasn't enough. The remaining tuition, room, board, and expenses came to about $25,000 per year. I didn't have that kind of money lying around, so I made a decision. I sold the small house I'd been living in for 15 years. It wasn't much, just a 2-bedroom cottage on the edge of town, but it was mine. I sold it for $80,000 and moved into a tiny studio apartment above a laundromat. The rent was cheap, and I didn't need much space anyway. I gave Melissa the money for her first year of college. She hugged me tight and promised she'd make me proud. I believed her. The next 3 years, I worked myself to the bone. I kept my bookkeeping job during the day, worked as a cashier at a grocery store in the evenings, and cleaned office buildings on weekends. I barely slept. I lived on instant noodles and black coffee, but every semester, I scraped together enough money to keep Melissa in school. She called me regularly during those years. She'd tell me about her classes, her friends, her dreams of becoming a surgeon. I'd listen and smile, even when I was so exhausted I could barely keep my eyes open. Then came medical school. Melissa got accepted to Hartfield Medical School, one of the most prestigious programs in the state. I was overjoyed. But the tuition was staggering. $60,000 per year for 4 years? Even with loans, she'd need at least $40,000 up front for the first 2 years. I didn't have $40,000. I'd spent everything on her undergraduate degree, but I wasn't going to let her down. I took out a second job delivering newspapers at 4 in the morning. I sold my car and started taking the bus everywhere. I stopped buying new clothes. I cut my own hair. I stopped going to the doctor for my own health issues, because I couldn't afford the copays. And slowly, painfully, I saved $40,000 over 2 years. When I handed Melissa the check, she cried. She told me I was the best aunt in the world. She said she'd pay me back someday, that she'd take care of me when she became a successful doctor. I told her I didn't need to be paid back. I just wanted her to be happy. Medical school was brutal for Melissa, or so she said. She called less frequently, always claiming she was too busy studying. I understood. I didn't want to be a burden, so I just sent her encouraging text messages and care packages whenever I could afford them. 4 years later, Melissa graduated from medical school. She was now Dr. Melissa Hartford. She'd taken her mother's maiden name professionally. I was so proud I could barely stand it. I took time off work and traveled 6 hours by bus to attend her graduation ceremony. I sat in the back of the auditorium, tears streaming down my face as she walked across that stage. This was it. This was what all the sacrifice had been for. After the ceremony, I found Melissa outside, surrounded by her classmates. They were all celebrating, taking photos, popping champagne. I approached her with open arms, ready to congratulate her. She saw me and her smile faltered just slightly. "Aunt Katherine," she said, forcing brightness into her voice. "You came." "Of course I came," I said, hugging her tightly. "I'm so proud of you, sweetheart." She hugged me back, but it was stiff, uncomfortable. When I pulled away, I noticed her friends watching us with curious expressions. "Melissa," one of them said, a tall young man with kind eyes, "is this your aunt, the one you told us about?" "Yes," Melissa said quickly. "This is Katherine." The young man extended his hand to me. "I'm James Richardson. Melissa's told me so much about you. Thank you for everything you did to help her get here. I shook his hand, warmth flooding through me. It was nice to know Melissa had spoken about me to her friends. But before I could respond, another one of Melissa's friends, a polished young woman in an expensive dress, spoke up. Oh, so you're the aunt who paid for everything? That's so generous. Are you a doctor too? No, I'm a bookkeeper, I said simply. The woman's smile became a bit more forced. Oh, that's nice. I felt a shift in the air, something subtle but unmistakable. Melissa's posture had changed. She looked uncomfortable, almost embarrassed. We should get going, Melissa said abruptly. We have reservations at Le Bernardin. Le Bernardin. I knew that name. It was one of the most expensive restaurants in the city. Oh, I said, trying to hide my disappointment. That sounds lovely. Should I meet you there? Melissa hesitated. Her eyes darted to her friends, then back to me. Actually, Aunt Katherine, it's just a small thing with my classmates. Very casual. I don't think you'd enjoy it. The words hit me like a slap, but I forced myself to smile. Of course I understand. You celebrate with your friends. I'll head back home. Melissa looked relieved. Thanks for coming, Aunt Katherine. I'll call you soon. She kissed my cheek quickly and turned back to her group. They walked away, laughing and chatting, and I stood there alone in the emptying auditorium. I took the 6-hour bus ride home in silence, my heart heavy. Over the next few months, Melissa's calls became even less frequent. When she did call, the conversations were short and superficial. She started her residency at St. Mary's Hospital, one of the top hospitals in the region. I was happy for her, but I missed her. I tried to visit her once. I took the bus to the city and showed up at her apartment, a nice place in a trendy neighborhood. When she opened the door and saw me, she looked almost annoyed. Aunt Katherine, you should have called first, she said. I wanted to surprise you, I said, holding up a container of homemade cookies. I thought we could catch up. She didn't invite me in. She stood in the doorway, arms crossed. I'm actually really busy right now. I have a shift in 2 hours. Oh, I said, my smile fading. I can just drop these off then. She took the cookies without looking at them. Thanks. I'll call you later, okay? She closed the door before I could say anything else. I stood in that hallway for a long moment, staring at the closed door, trying to understand what had just happened. That was the last time I tried to visit her unannounced. Months turned into a year. Melissa's calls stopped altogether. I'd send her text messages asking how she was doing, but her responses were brief and distant. Busy at work. Talk soon. Can't chat right now. I told myself she was just overwhelmed with her residency. Being a doctor was demanding. She'd come around eventually. But deep down, I knew something had changed. I was sitting in my studio apartment one evening, eating dinner alone, when my phone rang. It was an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Hello? Is this Katherine Miller? A woman's voice asked. Yes, this is she. Miss Miller, this is Patricia Grayson. I'm a friend of your niece, Melissa Hartford. My heart leapt. Oh yes. Is everything okay? Is Melissa all right? There was a pause on the other end. She's fine, Patricia said carefully. I'm actually calling because I wanted to talk to you about something. Do you have a moment? I don't know if Melissa would want me telling you this, but I think you should know. Last week, a group of us went out for dinner. We were talking about our families, where we came from, that sort of thing. When someone asked Melissa about her family, she said her mother died when she was young, and she grew up mostly on her own. She said she worked multiple jobs to put herself through college and medical school. I felt the air leave my lungs. She said that. Yes, Patricia continued, her voice filled with sympathy. I was confused because I remembered her mentioning an aunt once, early in medical school. So I asked her about you. She got very uncomfortable and said you two had a falling out, that you'd been financially dependent on her, and she had to cut ties for her own well-being. I couldn't speak. My hands were shaking. Miss Miller, Patricia said gently, I did some digging. I asked a mutual friend, James Richardson. He remembered you from graduation. He told me the truth, that you're the one who paid for everything, that you sacrificed your home and worked yourself to exhaustion to give Melissa her career. I still couldn't find words. I just thought you should know, Patricia said. What she's doing, it's not right. You deserve better. Thank you for telling me, I managed to whisper. After I hung up, I sat in stunned silence for hours. The betrayal was so complete, so cruel, that I couldn't process it. I'd given this girl everything. I'd raised her, loved her, sacrificed my entire life for her future, and now she was telling people she'd done it all herself? That I was some kind of burden she'd had to escape? The pain was overwhelming, but then, slowly, the pain turned to something else: clarity. I realized I'd been living in denial. The signs had been there for months, maybe even years. The way Melissa had grown distant, the way she'd seemed embarrassed by me at her graduation, the way she'd shut the door in my face when I visited. She hadn't just forgotten about me, she'd erased me. I decided then that I wouldn't chase her anymore. I wouldn't beg for her love or attention. I would simply live my life and let her live hers. If she wanted nothing to do with me, fine. I'd survived worse. I threw myself into my work, picked up extra hours where I could. The physical exhaustion helped numb the emotional pain. I stopped checking my phone for messages from Melissa. I stopped wondering what she was doing, or if she ever thought about me. Months passed, then a year, then 2. I was 60 years old now. The years of overwork had taken their toll on my body. My back ached constantly. I had high blood pressure that I couldn't afford to treat properly. I was tired all the time, but I kept going. One afternoon, I was at the grocery store where I still worked part-time as a cashier. I was ringing up customers when I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It was like pressure, heavy and tight. I tried to ignore it, but it got worse. My left arm started to tingle. I knew what this was. I'd read enough medical pamphlets over the years to recognize the signs. I was having a heart attack. I managed to call out to my manager before my legs gave out. I collapsed right there in the checkout lane. I could hear people screaming, someone calling 911. My vision started to blur. The last thing I remember before losing consciousness was thinking about Melissa, wondering if she'd even care that I was dying. When I woke up, I was in a hospital bed. Bright fluorescent lights burned my eyes. There were tubes in my arms and a monitor beeping beside me. A nurse appeared at my bedside, checking my vitals. "You're awake," she said with a kind smile. "You're at St. Mary's Hospital. You had a heart attack, but you're stable now. The ambulance brought you here about 6 hours ago." St. Mary's Hospital. That was where Melissa worked. My heart rate spiked, and the monitor started beeping faster. "Try to stay calm," the nurse said. "You need to rest." "Is there a doctor?" I started to say, my voice hoarse. "Is there a Dr. Hartford here?" The nurse checked her chart. "Dr. Melissa Hartford?" "Yes, she's one of our cardiologists." "Would you like me to see if she's available?" I wanted to say yes. Part of me desperately wanted to see Melissa, to know if she'd come to me, if she still cared at all. But another part of me, the part that had been hurt too many times, said no. "No," I whispered. "Don't bother her." The nurse nodded and left the room. I lay there alone, staring at the ceiling, tears sliding down my face. The next day, I was moved from the ICU to a regular room. The doctors said I'd need to stay for at least a week for observation and treatment. They talked about stents and medication and lifestyle changes. I barely heard them. All I could think about was the fact that Melissa was somewhere in this building, probably walking past my room every day, and she had no idea I was here. Or maybe she did know. Maybe someone had told her, and she'd chosen not to come. On the 3rd day, I was sitting up in bed, picking at a terrible hospital meal, when there was a knock on my door. "Come in," I said. The door opened, and a man in a white coat stepped inside. He was in his early 30s, tall with kind brown eyes. He looked vaguely familiar. "Miss Miller?" he said. "I'm Dr. James Richardson. I'm one of the attending physicians here. I wanted to check in on you." James Richardson, Melissa's classmate, the one who'd shaken my hand at graduation. "I remember you," I said quietly. He smiled. "I remember you too. I heard you were admitted, and I wanted to see how you were doing." "I'm alive," I said with a weak smile. "That's something." He pulled up a chair and sat down beside my bed. "Miss Miller, I have to ask, does Melissa know you're here?" I looked away. "I don't know. I didn't ask anyone to tell her." James frowned. "You should let her know. She'd want to know." I laughed bitterly. "Would she?" James looked uncomfortable. He opened his mouth to say something, then closed it again. "You know, don't you?" I said. "You know she's been lying about me." He sighed deeply. "I've heard some things. Patricia told me she called you a couple of years ago." "She did." "Miss Miller," James said carefully, "I don't know what's going on between you and Melissa, but I do know this. You don't deserve to go through this alone. Whatever happened between you two, you're still her family. You're the reason she's a doctor." I shook my head. "She doesn't see it that way." "Maybe not," James said. But that doesn't mean it's not true. He stood up and placed a hand on my shoulder. I'm going to keep an eye on you while you're here, and if you need anything at all, you let me know. Thank you, Dr. Richardson. Call me James. He left the room, and I felt a tiny bit of warmth return to my chest. At least someone remembered. At least someone cared. But that warmth didn't last long. The next day, I was being wheeled down to radiology for some tests. As the orderly pushed my gurney through the hallway, I saw her, Melissa. She was standing at the nurse's station, reviewing a chart. She looked polished, professional, confident. Her hair was pulled back in a neat bun. She wore pearl earrings and a crisp white coat with her name embroidered on the pocket. Dr. Melissa Hartford. My heart clenched. The gurney slowed as we passed right by her. For a brief moment, our eyes met. I saw recognition flicker across her face. She knew who I was. But then just as quickly, her expression went blank. She looked away, turning her attention back to the chart in her hands, as if I were just another patient, just another face in the crowd. The gurney kept moving, and I was rolled past her. She didn't say a word. She didn't even acknowledge me. I closed my eyes and felt the tears come again. This time, I didn't try to stop them. I spent the rest of that day in a fog. The tests came back fine. My heart was damaged but stable. The doctors said I'd need medication for the rest of my life and significant lifestyle changes. No more working 3 jobs. No more skipping meals. No more ignoring my health. I nodded along, but I wasn't really listening. All I could think about was Melissa's face in that hallway, the cold, empty look she'd given me before turning away. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the moment over and over. Had I imagined the recognition in her eyes? Had she really seen me and chosen to walk away? Around 2 in the morning, there was a soft knock on my door. I assumed it was a nurse coming to check my vitals. "Come in," I said weakly. The door opened, and James Richardson stepped inside. He looked tired, like he'd been working a long shift. "Miss Miller," he said quietly, "I'm sorry to bother you so late. Do you have a moment to talk?" "Of course." He closed the door behind him and pulled up a chair. His expression was serious. "I saw what happened today," he said, "in the hallway." My throat tightened. "You did?" "Yes. I was at the nurse's station when you were wheeled past. I saw Melissa look at you, and I saw her turn away. I didn't know what to say." James leaned forward, his hands clasped together. "Miss Miller, I need to tell you something. I've known Melissa for 6 years. We went through medical school together, and I've watched her change during that time." "Change how?" I whispered. "When we first started school, she used to talk about you all the time. She'd tell us stories about how you worked multiple jobs to support her, how you sold your house, how you sacrificed everything. She was proud of you, grateful. Then what happened?" James sighed. "I think success changed her. As we progressed through school, she started spending time with people from wealthy families, people who'd never had to struggle, and I think she became ashamed of where she came from, ashamed of you." The words stung, but they also rang true. "By the time we graduated," James continued, "she'd completely rewritten her own history. She started telling people she'd done everything on her own, that she'd worked her way through school, that she had no family support. I called her out on it once, and she got angry with me, said I didn't understand what it was like to come from nothing. But she didn't come from nothing. I said, my voice breaking, she came from love. She came from someone who would have done anything for her." "I know," James said gently, "and that's why I'm here. Ms. Miller, what Melissa is doing is wrong. Not just morally wrong, but professionally wrong. As doctors, we take an oath to do no harm. And walking past a patient in need, especially one you know, especially one whose family, that's a violation of everything we're supposed to stand for. What are you saying?" James stood up. "I'm saying I'm going to do something about it. Tomorrow morning, there's a staff meeting. All the attending physicians and residents will be there. I'm going to bring this up." "No," I said quickly. "Please don't. I don't want to cause trouble. Miss Miller, you're not causing trouble. Melissa is, and someone needs to hold her accountable. She'll hate me even more." James looked at me with kind, sad eyes. "Miss Miller, I don't think she could hate you more than she already does. And honestly, I don't think you deserve to protect someone who treats you this way." Before I could respond, he walked to the door. "Get some rest," he said. "Tomorrow is going to be an interesting day." He left, and I was alone again with my thoughts. The next morning, A nurse came in early to help me wash and change into a clean gown. She wheeled me down to a different room for more tests, chatting pleasantly about the weather. I tried to focus on her words, but my mind was elsewhere. What was James going to do? Was he really going to confront Melissa in front of everyone? Part of me hoped he wouldn't. Part of me hoped he would. Around noon, I was back in my room, eating another terrible hospital meal, when I heard raised voices in the hallway. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was unmistakable. Someone was angry. A few minutes later, there was a sharp knock on my door. Before I could answer, the door flew open. Melissa stood in the doorway. She looked furious. Her face was flushed, her jaw clenched tight. She stepped inside and closed the door behind her, with more force than necessary. "What did you do?" she hissed. I stared at her, genuinely confused. "What?" "Don't play dumb with me, Katherine. You told James to humiliate me in front of the entire cardiology department." "I didn't tell him anything," I said, my voice shaking. "I didn't even know he was going to say anything." Melissa laughed bitterly. "Of course you didn't. You just happened to end up in my hospital, in my department, having a heart attack at the most convenient time possible." "You think I planned this?" I asked, incredulous. "You think I wanted to have a heart attack?" "I think you wanted attention," Melissa snapped. "You've always wanted attention from me, always guilt-tripping me, always reminding me of what you did. Well, guess what, Katherine? I don't owe you anything." The words hit me like a physical blow. "You don't owe me anything?" I repeated slowly. "No, I don't. You chose to help me. I didn't ask you to sell your house or work 3 jobs. You made those choices yourself. You were 7 years old," I said, my voice rising. "You were a child who just lost her mother. What was I supposed to do? Leave you in foster care? Maybe that would have been better." Melissa shot back. "At least then I wouldn't have spent my entire life feeling guilty about someone else's sacrifices." I felt something break inside me, some last fragile piece of hope that maybe, just maybe, Melissa still loved me. "Get out," I said quietly. "What? Get out of my room, now." Melissa's eyes widened slightly. She hadn't expected that. "Fine," she said, turning toward the door. "I'm done with this conversation anyway." "Wait," I said. She stopped, her hand on the door handle. "I need you to know something," I continued, my voice steady now despite the tears streaming down my face. "I don't regret helping you. I don't regret raising you or paying for your education or sacrificing my own comfort for your future. Because when I did those things, I did them out of love, real unconditional love, the kind of love that doesn't keep score or demand repayment." Melissa didn't turn around. "But you're right about one thing," I said. "You don't owe me anything. Not gratitude, not affection, not even basic human decency, apparently. So here's what I'm giving you, Melissa. I'm giving you permission to forget I exist. You don't have to lie about me anymore. You don't have to pretend I'm a burden you had to escape. You can just erase me completely, because I'm done." Melissa's shoulders tensed. "I'm done trying to be part of your life," I continued. "I'm done hoping you'll call or visit or even acknowledge my existence. I'm done breaking my own heart over someone who clearly doesn't care if I live or die. So go, live your life, be successful, be happy, but do it without me, because I'm finally choosing myself." For a long moment, Melissa stood frozen at the door. Then, without a word, she opened it and walked out. The door clicked shut, and I collapsed back against my pillows, sobbing. But beneath the pain, there was something else. Something I hadn't felt in years. Relief. About an hour later, James came to check on me. He took one look at my tear-stained face and sighed. "She came to see you," he said. "Yes, I'm sorry. I didn't mean for that to happen." "What did you say at the meeting?" I asked. James pulled up a chair. "I told them the truth. I said that one of our patients, you, is the aunt of Dr. Melissa Hartford. I said that you'd paid for her entire medical education, over $100,000, by selling your home and working multiple jobs. I said that you'd been admitted to our hospital with a heart attack 3 days ago, and that Dr. Hartford had seen you in the hallway and deliberately ignored you. What did everyone say?" There was silence at first. Then one of the senior physicians asked Melissa if it was true. She tried to deny it, said I was exaggerating, that our relationship was complicated. But I pressed her. I asked her directly if she'd seen you in the hallway. She finally admitted she had, and James shook his head. The department head was not pleased. He said that regardless of personal feelings, we have an ethical obligation to treat all patients with dignity and respect. He said that deliberately ignoring a family member who's hospitalized is unacceptable behavior for a physician at St. Mary's. Is she going to get in trouble? She's been placed on notice. One more incident like this, and she'll face a formal review. It won't destroy her career, but it's definitely going to follow her. I should have felt vindicated. I should have felt satisfied that Melissa was facing consequences for her actions. But mostly, I just felt empty. The rest of my hospital stay was quiet. I didn't see Melissa again. James checked on me daily, always kind, always professional. Other staff members were extra attentive, probably having heard about the situation. On my last day, as I was being discharged, James came to say goodbye. "Where will you go?" he asked. "Back to my apartment," I said. "Back to work. Eventually, though the doctors say I need to cut back my hours." James frowned. "Miss Miller, forgive me for saying this, but you shouldn't have to go back to working multiple jobs. You should be retired, enjoying your life. I can't afford to retire." He was quiet for a moment. Then he pulled out a business card and handed it to me. "This is the contact information for a lawyer friend of mine. She specializes in family law. I think you should talk to her." "Why?" "Because you gave Melissa over $100,000 for her education. That was essentially a loan, even if you didn't formalize it as such. You might be entitled to repayment." I shook my head. "I don't want her money." "Then consider it a gift to yourself," James said gently. "You've spent your entire life giving. Maybe it's time someone gave something back to you." I took the card and slipped it into my purse, though I doubted I'd ever use it. James drove me home personally, refusing to let me take a cab. When we arrived at my tiny studio apartment above the laundromat, he helped me inside with my belongings. He looked around the cramped space, at the single bed, the hot plate I used for cooking, the stack of bills on the small table. "Miss Miller," he said quietly, "you deserve so much better than this." "It's enough," I said. "It's always been enough." After he left, I sat on my bed and looked around at my life. This small room, these few possessions, this quiet, lonely existence, and I made a decision. I pulled out the business card James had given me and called the lawyer. Her name was Andrea Chen, and she agreed to meet with me the next day. I took the bus to her office, a sleek modern building downtown. She was a woman in her 40s, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. I explained the situation to her, showing her the receipts and bank statements I'd kept over the years, documentation of every payment I'd made for Melissa's education. Andrea reviewed everything carefully. "Miss Miller," she said finally, "this is a strong case. You have clear documentation of significant financial support provided to your niece. While it's true you didn't formalize this as a loan, there's legal precedent for recovering educational expenses in cases of familial support, especially when the recipient has explicitly rejected the relationship. I don't want to destroy her career," I said. "This won't destroy her career," Andrea assured me, "but it will require her to repay what you gave her, with interest. Given her income as a physician, she can certainly afford it." "How much are we talking about?" Andrea did some quick calculations. "With interest over the years, approximately $150,000. The number took my breath away. That money could change my life. I could retire. I could get proper medical care. I could finally rest. "Let's do it," I said. The lawsuit was filed 2 weeks later. Melissa was served with papers at the hospital. According to Andrea, she was shocked and immediately contacted her own lawyer. The case took 6 months to work its way through the system. During that time, I didn't hear a single word from Melissa. No calls, no texts, nothing. But I did hear from other people. Patricia, the friend who'd called me years ago, reached out. She said she'd heard about the lawsuit and wanted me to know she supported me completely. Several of Melissa's former classmates contacted me through social media, telling me they'd always suspected Melissa was lying about her background, and they were glad the truth was coming out. Even some of the staff at St. Mary's Hospital sent me messages of support. The court date finally arrived. I sat in the courtroom, Andrea beside me, as Melissa and her lawyer entered. It was the first time I'd seen her since the hospital. She looked different, thinner, tired. There were dark circles under her eyes. For a moment, our eyes met across the courtroom. I tried to read her expression, but I couldn't. The judge reviewed the case quickly. He looked at the documentation, asked a few questions, and then rendered his decision. "The court finds in favor of the plaintiff," he said. "Ms. Katherine Miller provided substantial financial support for the defendant's education, with a reasonable expectation of familial gratitude and respect. While no formal loan agreement existed, the court recognizes the inequity of allowing the defendant to benefit from such support while simultaneously denying the relationship. Dr. Melissa Hartford is ordered to repay Miss Miller the sum of $150,000, payable over 3 years. The gavel came down. It was over. Melissa stood quickly and left the courtroom without looking at me. Her lawyer followed, already on his phone. Andrea turned to me with a satisfied smile. That went well. I nodded, but I felt numb. Over the next 3 years, I received monthly payments from Melissa, exactly on time, every month, not a penny more or less than required. There were never any notes, no apologies, no explanations, just the money. I used it to pay off my debts first. Then I quit 2 of my 3 jobs. I started seeing a doctor regularly for my heart condition. I moved out of the studio apartment and into a small but comfortable 1-bedroom place in a quiet neighborhood. For the first time in decades, I could breathe. I started taking art classes at the community center. I'd always loved to paint, but never had the time or money for it. Now I did. I made friends, other women my age who'd spent their lives caring for others and were finally learning to care for themselves. I adopted a cat, a orange tabby I named Jasper, who slept on my bed every night and kept me company. I started living, really living, for the first time in my life. On the day I received the final payment from Melissa, I sat down and wrote her a letter. Not an angry letter or a bitter one, just an honest one. Dear Melissa, today I received your last payment. The debt is settled, but I wanted to write to you one final time. Not because I expect a response, but because I need to say these things for myself. I don't regret raising you. Despite everything that happened, I would make the same choice again. You were a child who needed love, and I had love to give. I do regret not setting better boundaries. I gave so much of myself that I lost myself. That wasn't your fault, that was mine. I forgive you for the lies you told and the pain you caused. Not because you've asked for forgiveness, but because holding on to anger was only hurting me. I hope you're happy, Melissa. I hope your career is fulfilling. I hope you find love and peace and all the things you deserve. But I also hope you learn something I had to learn the hard way. That success means nothing if you have to destroy the people who helped you achieve it. That there's no amount of money or status that can fill the emptiness left by cutting out the people who truly loved you. You were my daughter in every way that mattered. I'm sorry that wasn't enough for you. Goodbye, Melissa. With love always, Katherine. I mailed the letter and never received a response. I didn't expect one. 5 years have passed since then. I'm 65 now. My hair is completely gray, and I move a bit slower than I used to, but I'm healthy and happy and surrounded by people who value me. I still paint. I volunteer at a local women's shelter, helping other women who've given too much and need to learn how to take care of themselves. I have Jasper and my friends and my small but cozy apartment. I have peace. Sometimes I wonder about Melissa. I've resisted the urge to look her up online or ask mutual acquaintances about her. That chapter of my life is closed. But last month, something unexpected happened. I was at the grocery store buying vegetables for dinner when I heard a familiar voice behind me, Aunt Katherine. I turned around and there she was, Melissa. She looked older, more mature. There were fine lines around her eyes. We stared at each other for a long moment. "Hello, Melissa," I said calmly. She started, then stopped. She looked nervous, uncertain. I didn't know what to say. "How have you been?" she finally asked. "I've been well," I said. "And you?" "I'm okay." She hesitated. "I read your letter, the one you sent 5 years ago. I didn't respond. I just waited." "You were right," she said quietly, "about everything. I was ashamed of where I came from. I was ashamed of you, and I'm sorry." The apology hung in the air between us. Part of me wanted to forgive her immediately, to pull her into my arms and tell her it was all okay. But I'd learned better than that. "Thank you for saying that," I said. "I appreciate it." She paused. "Is there any chance we could talk? Maybe get coffee sometime?" I considered her offer carefully. "I don't think so," I said gently. "Too much has happened, Melissa. Too much hurt. I've built a good life for myself now, a peaceful life. I don't want to risk that." Her face fell, but she nodded. "I understand. I hope you're doing well," I said. "I really do, but I think it's best if we both just keep moving forward separately." "Okay," she whispered. I picked up my groceries and walked toward the checkout. As I reached the end of the aisle, I heard her voice one more time. "Aunt Katherine?" I turned back. "Thank you," she said, tears in her eyes, "for everything. I know I never said it before, but thank you." I nodded and gave her a small smile. Then I turned and walked away. Outside in the parking lot, I sat in my car for a moment, processing what had just happened. I thought I'd feel sad or angry or conflicted, but I didn't. I felt free. That evening, I painted. I stood at my easel in front of the window, watching the sunset, and I painted a picture of a bird flying away from an open cage. Jasper sat on the windowsill, purring contentedly. And for the first time in my entire life, I felt completely at peace with the choices I'd made. I'd given Melissa everything I had, and when she rejected me, I'd finally learned to give that love to myself instead. Some people might say I should have forgiven her completely. That family is family, no matter what. But I learned something important through all of this. Love without boundaries isn't love, it's self-destruction. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do, for yourself and for others, is to let go. I'm Katherine Miller. I'm 65 years old. I spent 30 years sacrificing everything for someone who didn't appreciate it. But I spent the last 5 years learning to appreciate myself, and that makes all the difference. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to Julia's Stories and hit that like button. Have you ever been betrayed by someone you sacrificed everything for? Share your story in the comments below. I read every single one. And remember, you deserve the love you give to others. Thank you for listening.